No one expected this. What began as a subtle shift in travel trends has now erupted into a full-blown crisis for the U.S. tourism industry. Canada, America's friendly neighbor and historically one of its largest sources of visitors, has quietly pulled the rug out. A wave of cancellations, boycotts, and redirected travel spending has left U.S. destinations reeling. For decades, Canadian tourists reliably filled hotels in Florida, casinos in Las Vegas, beaches in California, and shopping districts across New York. But something has changed, and the consequences are bigger than anyone imagined. It started with frustration. Many Canadians began voicing discontent over rising hostility at U.S. border crossings, unexpected visa complications, and a growing perception that their presence wasn't welcome. Combined with political rifts, surging travel costs, and America's internal instability, Canadians began reconsidering their travel habits. In 2024 alone, Canadian tourism to the U.S. dropped by over 30%. But that was just the tip of the iceberg. What followed was a coordinated shift. Online communities began promoting domestic travel and international destinations that weren't America. Hashtags like #BoycottUSA and #TravelElsewhere began trending, especially after certain U.S. states passed controversial laws that clashed with Canadian values. Then came the numbers. In early 2025, economists started sounding the alarm. Entire regions that once thrived off Canadian spending, border towns, ski resorts, theme parks, golf courses, reported revenue plunges. In places like Florida, where Canadian tourists make up over a fifth of the international market, hospitality layoffs surged. Restaurant closures, empty resorts, and half-full flights became the new normal. Air Canada reduced its U.S. routes. Major travel agencies in Toronto and Vancouver began offering discounts to Europe, Mexico, and Asia, while quietly scrubbing U.S. packages from their marketing. The message was subtle but clear: find a new favorite. And Canadians listened. The numbers show a rapid realignment. Mexico saw a 17% spike in Canadian arrivals. Europe's Schengen region reported record growth from Canadian tourists, while Japan and South Korea noted historic highs. But for the U.S., it wasn't just about losing travelers. It was about losing trust. The image of America as a welcoming, exciting, and safe destination began to crack. Tourists didn't just stop booking trips, they began actively avoiding them. The shift was cultural, not just financial. Meanwhile, U.S. cities are feeling the aftershocks. In Buffalo and Detroit, where Canadian weekend shoppers were once the economic lifeblood, malls are seeing record vacancies. California's wine country, once popular with wealthy travelers from Alberta and British Columbia, is now offering aggressive discounts just to fill rooms. Even iconic destinations like Orlando and Las Vegas are reporting the worst spring travel seasons in years, not because global travel is down, but because key markets like Canada have turned away. This isn't a temporary dip. It's a structural collapse. The tourism ecosystem is complex. hotels rely on predictable flows of international guests. Airlines depend on cross-border routes to maintain profitability. Small businesses, the tour guides, family diners, beachside rentals, are the first to fall when the flow stops. In 2025, Canadian tourists were expected to contribute nearly $20 billion to the U.S. economy. That number now looks like a fantasy. And the ripple effects are expanding. U.S. states that banked on tourism for their budgets are facing revenue shortfalls. Local governments are slashing promotion campaigns and cutting services. And still, the numbers keep declining. What happens next is even more unsettling. Other countries are watching closely. Australia and Germany, also once large contributors to U.S. tourism, have seen similar drops, citing safety concerns and rising xenophobia. The U.S. brand abroad is weakening, not just in politics or media, but in something far more tangible, where people choose to spend their time and money. Tourists don't just look for beauty or fun. They want to feel respected, safe, and welcomed. And in 2025, many are saying America no longer checks those boxes. In response, American officials are scrambling. There are talks of launching charm offensives, new marketing campaigns to woo Canadian travelers back. Some governors are even considering reversing controversial travel-related laws that alienated foreign guests. But the damage may already be done. Trust, once broken, takes years to rebuild. And with each passing month, the U.S. finds itself deeper in a tourism vacuum, while competitors from Europe to Southeast Asia surge ahead. This crisis goes beyond tourism. It reflects a broader erosion of soft power. When people stop visiting your country, they stop connecting with your culture. They stop buying your products, sharing your values, or advocating for your brand abroad. The tourism collapse is a symptom of a deeper global disconnect. And while the headlines focus on economic losses, the real story is about influence, and what happens when a nation loses it. No one saw it coming this fast. But make no mistake, the Canadian tourism boycott is not an isolated event. It's a signal. A red flag for an America that took its place in the world for granted. And while politicians debate causes and solutions, airports remain quiet, hotel lobbies empty, and small-town economies crumble in silence. What happens next will shock many. But for those paying attention, the warning signs were there all along. As the boycott deepens, American businesses that once catered specifically to Canadian tastes are beginning to vanish. Specialty grocery stores near the border, known for stocking Canadian products and bilingual signage, are now boarded up or running liquidation sales. RV parks in Arizona and Texas, once packed with snowbirds from Manitoba and Quebec during the winter season, now sit half empty. Their owners quietly admit, the Canadian flags are gone. What used to be a seasonal migration of loyal repeat visitors has turned into a memory. What's more alarming is how this is starting to affect real estate and long-term investments. In states like Florida, realtors are reporting a steep drop in home purchases by Canadian retirees. Properties that once sold within days are now lingering for months. The once booming vacation home market is cooling fast. Canadian buyers are pulling out, not just because of high interest rates or inflation, but because they no longer feel welcome or secure on U.S. soil. Financial analysts are now warning of cascading effects. Local banks that underwrote loans for hotels, resorts, and entertainment complexes in tourist-reliant states are starting to see missed payments. In Nevada and South Carolina, foreclosure rates for tourist-centric properties are beginning to rise, not at crisis levels yet, but trending in the wrong direction. This isn't just a warning sign, it's an early tremor. And with summer approaching, the high season that used to rescue struggling businesses may instead expose just how hollow the recovery really is. The U.S. government, for its part, appears caught off guard. Federal tourism data is always a step behind, but private sector indicators are painting a bleaker picture in real time. Online booking platforms report major drop-offs in reservations from Canadian IP addresses. Airline analytics firms are publishing graphs that show steep declines in inbound flight bookings. Even toll roads and car rental companies are noticing a pattern. Canadian license plates are becoming a rarity, where once they were as common as sunshine in July. And then, there's the cultural toll. For many Canadians, traveling to the U.S. was more than just a vacation, it was a tradition. Childhood road trips to Disneyland, shopping weekends in New York, fishing getaways in Minnesota. These weren't just travel plans, they were memories passed from one generation to the next. Now, that emotional connection is fraying. Canadian media outlets are amplifying stories of discrimination, over-policing, and unpredictable border policies. Talk shows openly debate whether America is still a friendly neighbor, or a place to avoid altogether. In this new reality, trust has become the rarest commodity. The sentiment shift isn't just anecdotal, it's systemic. Even Canadian schools are redirecting field trips to Europe and domestic destinations instead of Washington, D.C. or Boston. University students, once eager to study abroad in the States, are increasingly opting for programs in the UK, Australia, or Scandinavia. The long-term implications are profound. A generation that once grew up with American pop culture and landmarks as familiar reference points is now looking elsewhere, east, west, and inward. Meanwhile, U.S. competitors are capitalizing. Countries like Portugal, Thailand, and Costa Rica are launching full-scale marketing campaigns aimed directly at Canadian travelers. Their message is simple and effective: we welcome you. And it's working. Travel influencers and YouTubers in Canada are now producing content that avoids the US altogether, and they're getting millions of views. The new aspirational destinations no longer include New York skylines or California beaches. They feature European castles, Asian night markets, and South American coastlines. And so, the economic story merges with a psychological one. America isn't just losing tourism dollars, it's losing relevance in the travel imagination of an entire population. That kind of erosion doesn't fix itself with a few billboards or glossy ad campaigns. It takes years, sometimes decades, to rebuild a fractured relationship. And right now, there's no plan in place. Yet perhaps the most chilling aspect is how quiet the collapse has been. There are no headlines shouting about this in Times Square or Washington. No emergency tourism summits. No national push to mend ties. It's as if the country doesn't quite realize what's slipping through its fingers. But in towns like Niagara Falls, Myrtle Beach, or Palm Springs, the silence is deafening. And still, this is only the beginning.